Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most fascinating and, frankly, most controversial political survival stories in modern history. We are breaking down Benjamin Netanyahu. This is a guy who has fundamentally reshaped geopolitics, spending a staggering 16 non-consecutive years in power. He hasn't just survived, he officially surpassed the nation's legendary founding father, David Ben-Gurion. Okay, let's dive right into this, because here is the ultimate political paradox of our time. How does a single leader hold on to power for that long while simultaneously facing international outrage, mass domestic protests, and active, highly serious charges of bribery? I mean, how does that work? To figure out how he pulls this off, we have to kind of ignore the daily headlines for a minute and map out the actual mechanical system behind his strategy. To understand the player, we first have to understand the board. If you look at the US presidential system, it's pretty much a winner-takes-all battlefield, right? But Israel, they entirely reject that rulebook. Instead, they use a parliamentary system of proportional representation. Citizens vote for parties to fill the Knesset, which is their national parliament. There is no single winner who takes the whole pie, because the seats are divided proportionally based on the exact percentage of votes each party gets. Which brings us to the absolute magic number in Israeli politics, 61. Out of 120 seats in the Knesset, you don't actually need to win the popular vote to become prime minister. You just need to mathematically cobble together a coalition of at least 61 seats. And you have a strict ticking clock of 28 to 42 days to negotiate, compromise, and lock those partners in. Section 1. Mastering the board, conquering Likud and the Knesset. So Netanyahu's story really kicks into high gear back in 1992. Having spent a dozen years in the US, he used his American background and this intense modern media savvy to ruthlessly take over his right-wing Likud party. Think of it kind of like a brilliant, disruptive corporate takeover. He completely bypassed the old political elites in the Central Committee, pushing for popular vote among all party members. Using these flashy, American-style campaigns, he basically wiped out the old guard. By 2012, he had secured over 70% of the vote within his party. Just total dominance. There's a reason international researchers literally call the guy a magician. His real superpower isn't just winning votes, it's alliance building. Think about how rigid politics usually are. Well, Netanyahu realized early on that rigid ideology kills political potential. So he willingly pivoted away from his center-leaning neoliberal economic roots to court religious and far-right blocs. By aligning with their strict views on Jewish values and making absolutely zero territorial compromises, he bought himself incredibly loyal coalition partners. To see this magic in action, you just have to look at the 2009 election. Likud actually lost the popular vote. They won only 27 seats, which was one fewer than the opposing Kadima party. By normal logic, Kadima's leader should have become prime minister, but Netanyahu outplayed them in the shadows. Before the president even formally made the offer to form a government, Netanyahu had already gone behind the scenes, allied with his religious and far-right blocs, and locked in a 65-seat coalition. He proved he was the only one who could actually govern. Section 2. The dividends, building an economy, and the Mr. Security persona. But look, you don't stay in power this long just with political games, right? You have to actually deliver. Starting as finance minister in 2003, Netanyahu enacted a radical, ruthless liberalization of the Israeli economy, slashing subsidies to reduce foreign dependence. Look at the massive jump here. Under his broader leadership, Israel transformed into a global powerhouse. GDP per capita skyrocketed from under $20,000 to $52,000. He sparked a massive tech boom, bringing in global giants like Intel, Google, and Apple, and basically made Israel an irreplaceable node in the global supply chain. And this incredible economic leverage, it paved the way for a historic, norm-breaking diplomatic triumph, the 2020 Abraham Accords. Historically, Arab states demanded Israel return the occupied West Bank in exchange for peace. Netanyahu completely changed the equation. He offered Gulf states crucial green tech and cybersecurity to help diversify their economies. In return, he got regional normalization. He literally achieved peace for peace without giving up a single inch of land. But for his hardline base, diplomacy is never really enough. He meticulously crafted this persona of Mr. Security, the ultimate protector of the Jewish state. Under his watch, Israel introduced globally renowned defense marvels. We're talking about the Iron Dome, the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, and the Spider systems. These are wildly advanced anti-aircraft and anti-ballistic shields that intercept rockets and drones, physically proving Israel's military technological supremacy. Yet, his security legacy carries this really profound and extreme paradox. On one hand, you have the absolute technological triumph of stopping intense Iranian missile barrages, like the intercepts seen in August 2025. But on the other hand, you have the devastating, catastrophic failure of the October 7 Hamas attack. It's a stark, sobering contrast. A high-tech protective shield in the sky versus the shattering reality of vulnerabilities on the ground. Section 3. The Wedge, Demographics and Polarization. So, despite massive security fluctuations over the years, Netanyahu maintained a remarkably steady approval rating of around 60% from 2009 all the way to 2021. How do you do that? Well, you become a master of the wedge. Society is largely split. The Mizrahi, who are of Middle Eastern and North African descent, form the largest bloc. Historically, they felt deeply sidelined and marginalized by the Ashkenazi European elites who founded the country. Netanyahu saw this resentment, and he weaponized it into his ultimate political engine. He basically targeted the deepest fears of this traditional base. Foremost among those was the fear of a two-state solution. Think about the geography for a second. For his base, an independent Palestinian state right next door wasn't just a policy disagreement, it was viewed as an existential threat. By fiercely saying no and opposing it at every single turn, Netanyahu became their indispensable shield. He also exploited a second, very structural fear, the tension between Israel being a Jewish state versus a pure democracy. If it's a pure democracy, then Arab minorities must have equal decision-making power. This tension completely erupted in 2021 and 2022 during the Bennett-Lapid government. For the first time, this opposition coalition invited an Arab Islamist party, Ram, into the ruling coalition. Suddenly, an Arab party had an unprecedented say in national security. And Netanyahu seized on this immediately. He activated his loyalty playbook, framing this inclusive coalition as the ultimate betrayal in Israeli history. He amplified the narrative that his right-wing rivals had completely sold out the country's security. He polarized the electorate to the absolute extreme, successfully convincing his base that only he could form a legitimate government to actually protect the Jewish people. Finally, Section 4, the climax, the judicial crisis and the backlash. Which brings us to his most audacious gamble yet. This is where his mastery of the system collided head-on with the limits of democracy. In 2021, driven by that fear and loyalty we just talked about, his approval rating hit an incredible peak of 75% among his base. And here is the crazy part. He achieved this peak while actively facing highly publicized charges for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. His voters simply didn't care. They believed the system was entirely rigged against him. Netanyahu completely harnessed that exact distrust. His voters deeply resented the Supreme Court, which they viewed as this unelected, Ashkenazi-dominated institution that just constantly vetoed their elected government's policies. So, Netanyahu pushed for a radical judicial reform, a law allowing a simple majority of just 61 Knesset votes to completely override literally any Supreme Court ruling. But this move kind of broke the spell for a massive portion of the public. If we map out the timeline, the 2019 bribery charges didn't sink him. He peaked in 2021, but the 2023 judicial overhaul attempt was a bridge too far. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets, viewing it as an anti-democratic power grab specifically designed to keep him out of prison. Combine that intense domestic outrage with the massive security failures we just discussed, and by 2025, you see his approval crash to just 37%. Which leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. Has the magician finally run out of tricks? Benjamin Netanyahu has mastered the parliamentary board like no one else in history. I mean, he's built economies, forged unlikely alliances, and weaponized demographics. But today, trapped between unprecedented domestic polarization, a plummeting approval rating, and immense international pressure, the ultimate political survivor faces his absolute greatest test yet. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and always look at the systems beneath the surface.